and what I'd like to do is just welcome Dr. April Diviney. You can turn camera on there. There we go. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's getting a bit dark, so I've had to like turn on all my lights and things, so hopefully it's not too rubbish and shiny.
Yeah, I can see you and it looks good. It's great. So you've worked with us on a number of different things in the past. So you've been on some of our courses and teaching some of the courses. You've done a lot of webinars with us in the past, and you're a full-time doctor now. And you've also got a degree in education as well, haven't you? So you've been
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how did the degree go?
It went well, successfully. So I passed. So that's good. I did my degree kind of part-time last year. So I was working in A&E and doing my degree on the side and kind of extra funding. But I do all these webinars and do all the teaching because I quite enjoy it and I can talk for England. So so yeah, I'm glad I'm doing it. You can go on to kind of like diplomas and masters and things in education as well. So, may do that in the future, not sure yet.
Right, so doctor kind of full time, but then you've also got this education on the side as well, which is fantastic because you've worked with us and you've been a teacher with us for the kind of the last maybe 4 years at least.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, I do kind of Project London mostly in the simulations. Obviously that's changed a little bit this year, but I'll come to how we've kind of changed it a little bit like later on and talk to you about that because we've got kind of a different sort of teaching day on Saturday.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Right, okay, well, I think we best get straight into it. So we're going to go through 10 things that students need to do when they're applying to medical school. So I'll hand it over to you at this point and let you run with it.
Yeah, cool. So I've tried to order them in a way that would be have kind of a good flow. So we'll try and come to each one of them. And as Mark said earlier, they are a little bit more of an overview. So with other webinars and kind of future ones that we're doing, we do go into them quite in a bit more detail. So if you do want to know more, there's free webinars out there that you can get more information off of. So these are kind of more top tips and more of an overview of the application process. So the first one, thing one, so what I've kind of said, and it kind of leads on a little bit from the poll questions that Mark's done. I can see that there's lots of people that are 100% sure, some people still considering it, and then there's some people that, maybe not. But I think that's actually really important because if you're still deciding, that's still fine because, you might not be sure at the minute. I think that is something that you do need to consider because a lot of people kind of go into medicine because maybe they are told that they'd be good as a doctor, but they're not really sure actually what the day-to-day life involves, or they know that it's a good career and things like that, so they kind of know the superficial things about it. But I think you should really understand what medicine at university means. So it's a long degree, it's at least 5 years long. You've obviously got some universities that are doing it for 6 years, but you need to know what the 5 years involves. Yes, there's a lot of learning, but yes, there is kind of social aspects to university life, and it's the same at medicine. There's clinical years, there's labs and exams. So, really understand, is medicine what you want to do? And I've put these kind of things to have a little bit of a think about, because have a think about what you can do with a medical degree. The people that are still kind of considering medicine, you don't have to go into being a doctor once you complete a degree of medicine. I know a lot of people that I know actually completed their degree and didn't go on to become a doctor. There's people that have gone into research, there's medical legal work, completely change the path and think, oh yeah, don't want to do that anymore, and then think of something totally different that they enjoy. But it's a really good basis of a degree. So you can go into teaching. Yes, I've done medical education, but you can go into full-time teaching and secondary school teaching and things like that. My sixth form tutor was actually he was training to be an obstetrician for a while, and he went into teaching. So you can change things if you've got a degree in medicine. It shows dedication, it shows capability, it shows knowledge. So, you know, you can go into other careers. And the other kind of thing to consider, I think, is quite important. What will your life be like after university? Will you go down to be a hospital doctor? Do you know what a hospital doctor's job is? You know, are you aware that, you know, you do have some exams? They're not very often. I think I've had one exam so far, and I'm in like 5 years down the line after university. So it's not a whole load of, you're not weekly exams or anything like that. But, you know, you still have to do kind of portfolios, and you still are learning on the job. It's, you know, if you enjoy kind of furthering your learning, it's actually a really good job to be doing. So you really have to think, do I know what I'm getting in for? Which, you know, there's great things about great things about the job, and you just need to know a little bit more about the university degree and the possibilities for jobs afterwards. It sounds scary being 16, 17, 18, like you're thinking about that. But yeah, you do have to think about that at this, you know, stage of your life. You know, young adults, you're kind of trying to think about what career path you're going down. So leading on to that, so our number 2 is work experience and insight. So this is one of the reasons why universities want you to gain work experience. It's because they want to know whether you know that medicine is the right thing for you. So you kind of, the 2 biggest words I say every time I'm teaching anyone that wants to go into medicine, one of them is insight, and one of them we'll come to later. Insight's a really big thing, and that includes work experience. So it includes your shadowing, it includes your GP work, it includes your care home and volunteering, and this kind of care role that universities are looking for. It's because those show you insight, that shows you understand what the day-to-day life is like, what the positives are, maybe what the negatives are, if there are any that you come across for people. You know, I'm sure you've heard stuff on the news and things, but that's insight. If you understand it a little bit more, then that's great. Do you understand what an MDT is? Multidisciplinary team. Do you understand what everyone's roles are in, you know, healthcare settings? You know, this insight word is actually really important. And I know there will be many of you that have struggled over lockdown and this pandemic with trying to get work experience. And I think the key thing, if you are struggling, is to be looking at it from an insight point of view, because there's lots and lots of stuff out there that you can get insight from. This is one of them. You're doing one of them now. You're on a webinar to try and gain more insight into what it's like and what the application process is like. You know, there's lots of other free webinars. You know, we've mentioned that we've got loads on the website and the YouTube channel. There's loads of podcasts, you know, there's books, TV programs, you know, 24 hours in A&E. That's a great example, because actually it gives a really good insight into what things are like. So yes, you might struggle a little bit at the minute, but insight's really important, because if you're asked about life as a doctor and why do you want to be a doctor, and those interview questions, it helps you answer those questions. So that's why I think it's quite important. But yes, work experience is part of this. So shadowing and volunteering and jobs and working in charity shops and things like that. So there is ways to do it. Like we were kind of highlighting earlier, Saturday we're doing a bit of a different thing, and there is other options out there. There's people that are going into like a virtual work experience environment. We're doing kind of a GP live thing, which it's turned out quite cool actually. We've got like a whole GP set. So companies are changing. They're kind of making sure that everyone knows that, you know, everyone's in the same boat. So people are trying to get more work experience for you know, students like yourselves. So yeah, I think that's the main thing about work experience and insight. So move on a little bit. So leading on from that, I think one of the biggest things that I actually really regret, and it's going to be passed on as wisdom to you guys, is keeping a diary. I started doing work experience, I think, from like year 8, because I knew I wanted to be a doctor from that point. I obviously forgot everything that I did by the time I was applying in year 13. You're going to forget the little details. You're going to forget what you've learned, what you've seen, what questions you asked. So I actually think it would be really useful to keep a diary, because by the time you come to write your personal statement, by the time you come to the interview process, you can kind of look back on your diary and say, oh yeah, like I learned that. Maybe I can bring that up at interview. Maybe I can say that would make me, that's what I learned to be a good communicator. So you can actually bring that in. So that's why I think it's quite useful, because otherwise you'll kind of get to 2 weeks before your interview and be like, oh God, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? What am I going to have an answer for this? So I think keeping a diary can kind of, it makes it a little bit easier. So it can be things you've learned, maybe questions you had and they were answered, maybe questions you still have, which is okay, that's fine. You're not meant to know everything at 16, 17, 18. That's not the point. It's not the knowledge part of it, of the healthcare system. It's more that you are, thinking about it and learning from it. So, leading on from that, this is my second big word that I always say. So insight is the first, but the second one, and you are going to get bored about me saying this, but is reflection. This is huge, and I mean huge. Lots and lots of students don't understand how important it is. And this again is something that we do as doctors, as nurses, as healthcare professionals. It's actually something that we do all the time. We keep what's called a portfolio as doctors, and it goes through reflection processes of cases you've seen, interesting cases, maybe mistakes that you've made and how you learned from them, and you can put kind of reflective cases in, and it's something that you're actually judged on as a doctor to kind of pass on to the next level. So it's really a really important skill to have. So I think universities like to see that, and whether you have that as a skill before you get to medical school. People will do it automatically. Some people might be more analytical. Some people might evaluate situations more and be able to conclude what was the outcome. So this is why it's important. And I know it seems like a little bit of a weird diagram, but this is kind of quite a comprehensive example. And I mean, just an example. There's no right or wrong way to reflect. So this is just something that I know a lot of people have used. So, this reflective cycle, it talks about quickly describing what happened, evaluating it, analysing it, coming up with a plan, and coming up with a conclusion. So, you can use this, we'll come to this, you can use it for personal statements, you can use it for interviews. It's a really good skill to have. And we do talk about it quite a lot. I think Mark's kindly put one of the previous articles that we've done. And if you do need to have a little bit of a read more about it, then it's so important. We'll do webinars on this, on just a whole webinar itself on reflection, on how to use it and things, so do tune into that one as well. I'll show you I'll kind of explain a few examples when we come to our next couple of points here though. So personal statements, again, you can see in capitals, reflect. We'll come to that at the end. So number 5 for personal statements. Some of you, I know it seems that you're applying in October 2020, so this will be really key for you right now. So personal statements, I've kind of got general top tips for that. One of the biggest ones is that people kind of try and write it all straight away. You know, I'll do my introduction, I'll do this, I'll do this. Just bullet point things, because you're going to have lots of achievements that you're going to try and fit in. But some of them you actually may not need. And you only have 4,000 characters. Once you start writing it, it's actually not very much. So if you bullet point things, you know, draft things, draft your introduction, because the first sentence is going to catch that, you know, reviewer's eye. Draft again, the first one that you do, you know, my first one was, I have a saved one somewhere, and it's awful. It's the most cliched personal statement ever. My last one that I actually sent in was good, I think. But the first one was awful. So please draft again. Please get loads of people to read it, even if they're not medical. So I'd always get my dad to read my personal statement. I think I got him to read all my reports during university as well. Because people will have strengths that you won't have. I'm not very good at English language. So my dad is very good at that, and he'll be able to go through the grammar and spelling and be like, actually, this sentence, what are you trying to say? So, you know, have lots of people look at it, even if they're not medical. That's, you know, that doesn't matter. If they are medical, then great, but don't worry too much. You know, it just has to read quite well. It has to have, you know, great grammar and spelling, because you do get marked on that. And the biggest thing is to actually reflect in your personal statement. I told you you'd get bored of me saying it, but to actually reflect in your personal statement, if you're writing a sentence, you can use that Gibbs reflective cycle. So if you're saying, for example, I was the rugby captain in school, and you're going to talk about that. They don't want to know what school it was. They don't, because they've got that. They don't want to know what things you won. They don't want to know the team that you were in. You can just say, I was the rugby captain. That's your description. You can talk about the evaluation and the feelings behind of it. So I felt that I was a very good leader because I had good communication skills. I took my team's kind of advice. We were able to you know, talk in a certain way to each other. You know, it worked quite well, and from that, you know, we won this. You know, that's your evaluation. You can say your action plan and conclusion. You can say, you know, from this, I know that I've developed good communication skills because I'm able to talk in a certain way, but then change it for other things, you know, and I think because of that, that will make me a really good doctor. That's your conclusion. So you can use that reflective cycle to actually write your personal statement. Okay. So that was our personal statements. Interview, again, it's being prepared. So a diary will help you be prepared, because you'll know what was on your personal statement, you'll know what's on your work experience, you know what you've done at school, you know things you've learned. But I think preparedness is really important, because if you've applied to a university, know what interview style they have. Have they got an MMI? Have they got a panel? Have they got group? Have they got simulated patients? Some universities do that. So really kind of understand, look at past interviews that maybe that the university has done, just so you are a bit more prepared. There are common questions that you can prepare for. Yes, don't have a rehearsed statement, because you will sound like a robot. But common questions like, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to apply to this medical school? What makes you a good leader? What makes you a good communicator? The very common kind of buzzwords, they're the ones that you can prepare for. And yeah, practice them. You know, practice actually talking them through. You can see I should practice not doing this with my hands so much when I'm in an interview, but you know, you can learn that from practicing with family, practicing with friends, even having a camera in front of you and kind of put it up, record yourself talking to a family member. Then you can see, do you twiddle with your hair? Do you sit kind of crouched and your very closed body language? You know, using that camera can actually alter the way that you kind of answer questions. And yeah, I know a lot of people do get a little bit worried about the kind of simulated, so the ones that are like talking through a situation with an angry person, or kind of breaking kind of bad news to someone. You know, people do worry about that, but the end of the day, it's those ones are kind of more looking at your communication skills. So ultimately, you just have to stay calm, be respectful, and pretend that is a real person, because that's what they want to see. You know, we do kind of simulated exams, we do simulated communication skills at university, at med school. So they want to see that you can actually develop. And yes, you might not get everything right in that bit of the interview, but fine. They want to see that you're a person, because you're going to be talking to people as a doctor when they're the most vulnerable. So they want to see that you can respond and you can be a human. So that's what they're trying to see. So, you know, as long as you can actually think about them as a person, think about how you treat them as your own family member, then that, you know, you'll come off quite well from that. And yes, reflect. So again, it's so important. So it's very similar to when I was talking about the personal statement bit. When you're answering a question that in an interview, so say for example, they ask, why do you want to be a doctor? You can again incorporate, you know, that Gibbs section and talk about it as a brief description, and kind of say, you know, I want to become a doctor. You know, there's actually lots of reasons. One of the reasons is, you know, I was in work experience. That's all you need to say, brief work experience. You know, I don't have to say I was in Royal Hospital doing cardiothoracic surgery. They don't want to know that. So just kind of say, I was on work experience and I seen a doctor, you know, talking through this situation with the patient. This is your evaluation bit and your analysis bit, and the feelings of the patient. You know, they talked through this with the patient. They, you know, came down to their level. They talked through things in a language they understood. They were so empathetic to their situation. And I could tell that the patient really responded and really appreciated that. And, you know, seeing that scenario is just something that I wanted to do as a doctor. And I think that I can do that. And I think going through medical school will, you know, help me get there. You know, you can say that sorts of things. Yes, it might sound a teeny bit corny, but you know, that's fine. Like, as long as you're analyzing things, as long as you're bringing in experience, you're bringing in that insight, that comes across quite well. Okay, and again, as Mark's kindly put down that link that we've done before, so we've got kind of preparing for medical school interviews, and I'm sure during the year when it gets a little bit closer to interview time, we'll be doing a kind of more of a webinar around that. So these are the more brief ones, because I know more people get a little bit worried about personal statements and interviews, so I'll keep this one a bit brief. UKCAT and BMAT, ultimately, these ones, it depends on where you're applying. So some people do both exams, some people do one, and it does depend on which medical schools you want to go to. So I only did the UCAT because the medical schools that I wanted to go to only took the UCAT. So just have a little bit of a think about which ones you want to apply to, and that might aid that decision. Maybe look at how those universities, or how some universities weigh them in their application process. So if you kind of take the exam, or if you know that you're not as, you know, good at the UCAT, for example, you can look at how universities weigh them in the application process. So some don't use them at all, Some use them as a cut-off system and say, right, anyone below that, this score, like 600, 700 or whatever, and they don't look at them at all. Some people use it as kind of who to offer interviews to and things like that. So just have a little look about how universities use them. And yeah, keep practicing. It's kind of doing mock exams and things. You just have to keep going, keep practicing. There's loads of practice papers on the internet, on the websites for the actual exams themselves. Know how long questions take to answer, how long you've got for an exam. So it is purely practice. I know a lot of people say that, but it's true. Especially with UCAT, it's not kind of a revision thing, but you just have to purely practice, which I know it takes time, but it will be worth it. Okay, so I shall move on. So again, I'll keep this quite brief because I don't want to patronize you guys. Ultimately, you got to get the grades. So I think my tips a little for this would just be make sure you're revising or kind of learning in a way that suits you. So again, people learn in different ways. I'm quite a kinesthetic learner, so I learn just while I'm doing. I have to be using my hands. I have to be kind of turning things over and highlighting and flashcards. And have to really be activating my brain. I can only revise for maybe an hour at the most, then I've got to go have a 10-minute break. I can't sit there for like 7 hours at a time. But yeah, some people learn by songs, typing, listening, things like that. Some people listen to like lectures and things and they learn that way. So just have a little bit of think about how you're revising. If it's not working, change it up. Just change it and then see how you get on. And if you don't understand, just ask. You've got kind of colleagues, you've got other students, you've got teachers and things. Because if you don't understand, then ultimately you can't quite kind of take the information in. So just ask. Because it's quite important, because you can get an interview, you can get your personal statement, you can get all that, but if you don't get the grades, you don't get the offer. So yeah, I won't labor that point. Okay, so last kind of bigger one is choosing the right medical school for you, and this is like an endless list. So these are just some of the ones that I've put on the slide, but I think the main thing is to think about what's right for you as a person. Is it better for you to be closer to family? Is it better for you to be far away from family? Do you need transport? Do you need a particular kind of extracurricular activity? Do you need kind of like a music school or an art school close by? Do you need more clinical hours? Do you want to be kind of seeing patients from day one, or do you want to do kind of the 2-3 years of kind of lecture stuff and then go on to that? Really do think about which medical school is right. And I think at the bottom there I've put ultimately, we've touched on it with the UKCAT and BMAT, but ultimately, know the application process and know how they score it, because you can choose ones that would be a little bit better for you. Because if you're a person who's lots of work experience but doesn't have as good GCSE and potential A levels, then maybe you need to be applying for different universities. But maybe if you've got top GCSE results and A level results and you don't have as much work experience, maybe you need to choose different universities. So just have a think, and you are going to be there for 5-6 years. So, you really need to think about, are you going to like it? Are you going to live there? Are you going to enjoy being there for those years? Because yeah, it's your life at the end of the day. You've got to really enjoy that degree whilst you're there at university. Okay, right, last one, not so heavy. So I just want to kind of give you a bit of an insight into actually the job. I know I've touched on insight. It's really important. I genuinely would not change my job for the world. As we talked about earlier, I have been able to do things and change my kind of work a little bit. So as I said, I've been able to take a little bit of time. I didn't work 100% hours last year. I took a little bit of time and done a degree. There's lots of people that are taking their degree abroad and their job abroad. You can follow your interests. You can work up a mountain in the Highlands of Scotland, or you can, work in Australia. You can work with a sports team. There's so many things that you can be doing. You can change your hours. You don't have to be full time. You can be working as hard and be in the hospital as much as you want. But you can change the job to what you need it to be, and I think that's something that you do kind of to be aware of, because I don't think many people understand that sometimes. And even if you do want to do a certain career, then you can become kind of a specialist and then like a subspecialist in that career, so you can make it your interests. And most people have a television, so you will have seen negative things, especially at present with kind of COVID and healthcare and social worker and bed space in hospitals. Yes, there are negatives, but ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think many jobs have some negatives, and that's just the nature. It is still a job, but there's so many positives. Even on me checking my patient list today, I was on call at the weekend, and we actually were at cardiac arrest, and this man's heart had completely stopped, and we were called there as a team to basically revive him and bring him back to life. And we did. Within like 2 minutes, he was down, maybe more, maybe even 4 or 5 minutes. But he's now awake in ITU, and he's actually kind of indicating, and actually he's got function back, which I think that is pretty cool, that this man's heart was stopped and he is now alive. So I don't know about you, but I think that is awesome. So yeah, I wanted to just end on that. So I know the application process can be hard, but once you get there, I promise you, I honestly thought that this time period in your lives, I thought was the most horrendous. So past that, I quite enjoyed it. I really enjoyed university, and I love my job. And that's me. I think that's enough talking.
That's really good, and that is an amazing story that you've just kind of casually dropped in there at the end. You went
Well, I only found out like 2 hours ago before this webinar, so I think I was just on a high from that.
No, that is amazing, and it is that's well done, and thank you for being a doctor. Like it's amazing, well done. Yeah, we've covered so much in there. I know we've kind of just touched on everything in like a tiny bit of detail, but I have tried to include links in the slides to all the kind of other articles, or if we've done a video or a webinar about something in particular, it'll go into way more detail than we can in this one, because every single one of those points that you've talked about needs its own webinar, its own course, it needs its own everything. So this is just like a super brief one where we can point all the students to all these different resources, and hopefully it gives the students that are applying next year as well a bit of a timeline of things that they're going to have to go through, and they're going to have to look at all these different elements individually. And you can watch our videos and read our articles, because we will be doing lots about those. And for the guys that are applying this October, you'll know all of this already. You'll be in that personal statement mode now, and you'll be starting to think about interviews and things as well. And again, we will have things there to help you as well. Yeah, so just a shameless plug at this point. If anybody does want the kind of GP work experience. We're doing the GP session. Dr. April Divinity here will be the GP at the weekend as well. So if anybody wants to join that course, there is a discount code on the slides there, so take note of that. Great. So at this point, I think we'll open it up to your questions. I can see that there's quite a lot of questions in there already, so we'll try and spend, say, the next kind of 15-20 minutes answering as many as we can, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
cool. So the first one that's got the most votes already is about work experience, and it just says, any tips for getting work experience?
Yeah, so you've got to be a bit of a machine, I think, and have a CV. If you don't have a CV, create one. And there's loads of kind of Google information bits about creating CVs, because then you can basically, if anyone asks for one, then you're ready and you actually have one waiting. If you're living in a particular area, which you know, contact any local hospitals and any local GPs, and I mean all of them. Just contact them all. Because then at the end of the day, like, even if they respond and say no, then you know the answer. If they respond and say yes, then you've got loads of options. I think just go for it and just actually send it out to hospitals everywhere. If you've got any hospices in the area, you know, they might just need someone to make some teas and coffees, or be at the entrance and just kind of handing out masks and making sure people are washing their hands. I know the A&E that I was working at last year, during like lockdown, they actually used volunteers that were kind of 17 years old, just making sure that everyone was having good hygiene at the door to reduce the spread. So there are options, you know. You can hand it into kind of, if there's any community kind of volunteering programs of like dropping things around to people's houses. There's, I know Age UK has kind of like a telephone befriending service. Honestly, if you think outside the box and think of kind of telephone ways, because I know there will be restrictions, but really kind of use every options. The Samaritans, you know, if there's anything from Red Cross, honestly, they work, and, you know, really appreciate volunteers when they can have volunteers. I know it is a little bit difficult at this time, but just really go for it. That's what I mean. You've got to be a bit of a machine and just send it everywhere, and just making sure that you're getting it out there if they ask for a CV.
Yeah, definitely. And the link that was in the slides and the video that's on our YouTube channel, when we did the webinar a couple of months ago, we literally did a full hour just about different ways to find work experience now that this whole lockdown thing has kicked in.
Yeah.
So anybody that's kind of, you know, voted for that question or wants that question answered, go and watch that YouTube video, and it will literally tell you 35-40 different ways of finding work experience or insight. So please go and have a look at that YouTube video. There's absolutely loads in there. Okay, cool. So the next question is from Sasha, and it says, what makes an applicant more appealing than your average student when applying to medical school specifically?
Good question. And there's a broad answer, and then there's also specific answers depending on each university. So we'll kind of come to the specific ones first, and I'll come to the broad one afterwards. So the more kind of specific ones, each university sometimes has kind of like person specifications in some way. So they might say they want this type of work experience, they want this type of exam, they want this type of course, they want, you know, you to have a care role. So there's kind of sometimes specific requirements for some universities, so that'll obviously make you more desirable in their eyes. I think you know, when it comes to each stage of the application process, there's a way to kind of bump yourself back up. And surprise, surprise, for personal statement and interviews, it's reflection. But it is because I think it shows a more mature person to be able to reflect on situations and to be able to to actually like analyze what works and what you're good at, because, you know, interviews, they say sell yourself, but what is it about you that is good? You know, there will be, each and every one of you will have positives about what makes you a better applicant, and it's just reflecting on you personally, what makes me good, you know, and actually trying to run with that. Are you, you know, quite a good communicator? Can you talk to people quite well? If you can, run with that, and what makes it part of your work experience, it makes that better. If you're able to do that and be able to identify your strengths, it comes across quite well to universities, I think. So my things, hence why I use it as an example, my thing is communication. I'm quite, that's one of my strengths as a doctor, is communication. And, you know, I brought that up in my interviews and things from my kind of work experience. And I think that came across quite well, because, you know, it puts you a bit above and beyond. If you kind of say, oh, I'm a good communicator, and then just leave it at that, that doesn't come across well. But if you say, oh, I'm a good communicator because I've done this, and this has developed my communication skills because I can now do this, and now this makes me a better doctor, that comes across really well to universities. So that comes across quite desirable, and it makes you quite a wanted applicant. And yes, there's like the specific ones we were talking about, you know, if you've got a better UCAT score, you know, obviously if you've got better grades, then yes, but, you know, if you can sell yourself quite well, that comes across quite well.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's that word reflection, isn't it? It's the biggest thing that we see with students on our courses, from when they start to when they leave, because we hammer and teach them reflection so much. At the start of the week, we have good applicants, but by the end of the week, once they've learned to reflect on what they're doing, they come out as better applicants because they know how to reflect. And like, we will bang on about it so much, but it is that important.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one's about GCSE results, and how important those grades are when applying to medical school.
Yeah, so again, sorry, it might seem I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it does totally depend on the university. So I got quite average GCSE results for a medical school applicant. I'll say that. I was had good GCSEs. But for example, I part of my so from kind of like age 10 to 15 kind of things, I lived in Birmingham from like before applying to university. So I actually was keen to stay at home, but I couldn't apply to Birmingham because I didn't have good enough GCSEs. So for Birmingham, yes, it's really important to have good GCSEs, but I think St George's down in London don't even count them at all, or they didn't when I was applying. So it does really depend on universities. Some only require kind of A start to C between English language and science and things. And then some really don't look at them at all, and some use it as a cut-off process. So it does depend on the university.
Okay, great. Yeah, again, each university will have the criteria, and they'll tell you what their specifications are when it comes to GCSE. So if you're not sure about which university and the GCSEs, just double check their website, because that always has the latest information. We use the websites when we're advising students as well.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that comes back to kind of choosing the right medical school, doesn't it, really? Because if you know that you have average GCSEs, or, you know, you've great GCSEs and top GCSEs, you might be applying to different universities then to someone else. So just have a little look, and that's why choosing the right medical school is important.
The next two questions are, they're kind of tied together, because I know our answer is going to be pretty similar for both of them.
Okay.
So it's, how do you stand out in an interview, and how do you write an amazing personal statement? And again, I know I've said it so many times already. Reflection. Obviously communication comes into it when you're talking about interviews as well, and how you communicate that, and how you act under pressure and things. There's a lot of things when it comes to interviews, but being able to reflect and throw back scenarios that you've been in and what you've learned from them is really impressive when it comes to the interview stage. So reflection is the answer to that one. And then personal statements. reflection again. And if there's anybody that is like wondering or wants a bit more detail about the personal statement, I think our next webinar, just looking at the board, on the 30th of September is just about personal statements. So if anybody wants just to know about personal statements, next webinar is all about that. So yeah, come back for that one.
Yeah, like Mark said, like reflection is really key. I think personal statements, I think one of the biggest kind of thing about when I've been reading personal statements is a lot of people go into kind of specifics. So a lot of people kind of say, oh, for 2 weeks of 2020, I did this work experience at this hospital with this surgeon doing this. No. It's wasting so many characters. Be brief. During my work experience, or if you want to be more specific, during a week of cardiothoracic shadowing. That's it. You know, they're not bothered. You know, they read so many personal statements, and there'll be lots of people trying to brag about where they've had shadowing and things like that. I know on my cringy personal statement, I tried to say about articles that I've read on the BMJ. I had no idea what I was talking about. So just be normal. They want to know that you have the skills that's needed. They want to know a bit more about you. So I know a lot of people say, oh, I have a personal experience and maybe want to be a doctor. Great, put it in. Some people kind of warn against it, saying, oh, it's a cliche, you know, everyone has a sick relative. But actually, that's your reason. It's your personal statement. If that's what makes you you, then put it in. You know, it's all the personal things about you. And, you know, reflecting on your life, reflecting on your skills and putting that into the personal statement, that's what's important. And it's the same with interview. You know, they want to know that you're a person and they want to know you. So they want to know your skills. They want to know how you're able to conduct yourself. They want to know you can talk. So that's why they do interviews for medical school. That's why they do the MMIs, because they kind of jump around and give you a chance at another person. And interviews, it's practice. So, you know, preparing that way, it's the reflective answers and practice those.
Right, okay, there's one kind of nice question that's at the top, and then what I want to try and do is because I'm just conscious of time, we'll answer this question here, and then we'll try and just answer as many questions as possible in like really 4 minutes. Yeah, okay. So we've got a nice one first. So the first nice one is, was it studying 24/7 in medical school like everyone says? You know, how was your experience of life as a medical student?
It wasn't 24/7 studying, I'll tell you that now. No, it was fine. It was just for first and second year of uni, especially, it felt like, yes, maybe you were revising when it came to exams and things like that. You had a lot more topic and a lot more content to revise for. So yes, you might have been revising for a bit longer than some of my other student colleagues, but they were also revising during exam period and things, and they might have had papers to write and things. So everyone would go to the library and you would kind of buckle down. But, you know, I still went out. I was part of the netball team for Manchester, and, you know, I played, so we trained Tuesdays, played Wednesdays, and sometimes had strength and conditioning for 1 year on Thursdays. So you still had all of that. I think I went home in first year most weekends because I was really homesick. You know, you obviously have the weekends off and things if you don't get a part-time job. But yeah, it's not 24/7 studying. And yes, when you get to exam periods, unfortunately you have to revise, but you have an exam, so you're gonna have to revise. But yeah, you kind of keep on top of work. You're not working every evening all the time. Yes, you might have some people that do that, but I'm not that sort of person. And a lot of people aren't. Most of the people, I don't think anyone that I knew was in my year or anything like that, everyone had a bit of a social life. We might go out to the pub on the Friday night and things. You know, it was really nice. Everyone bandied together and, you know, still played netball for years 3, 4 and 5. I still went home. I still see my friends, and it's quite a nice. You kind of get into like a little bit of a I don't know what the right word is, because you end up being in a little bit of a group, because that's the only people everyone starts to qualify and finish their degrees, so you kind of end up as like medics together. So yeah, you get really, really close friends, and I'm still really good friends with people 5 years down the line, people that I lived with, so it's really good.
Right, okay. Are you ready for
Okay, I'm ready.
kind of a couple of minutes of like answer questions as quick as possible, so we can try and get through as many as possible,
Yeah.
and then we'll have to wrap it up just for time, okay?
Okay.
Right, okay. First one, how early should you take and prepare for the BMAT/UCAT?
Oh, so how early you should take it? BMAT has certain dates, UCAT has certain dates. I think it's from July onwards. Start revising for UCAT maybe like a month or two beforehand, same at the BMAT. Done.
Okay, next one, advice on choosing the right universities for you.
Oh, say that again?
Advice on choosing the right universities for you.
So think about what your life is like. So I chose Manchester because I had a really good netball team, really good transport links. It was had lots of hospitals to choose from. It had dissection, which I really enjoy, because at that time I wanted to be a surgeon, not anymore. And yeah, just think about what you want to do for 5 years. You've got to be there for 5 years. Done.
Okay. Another answer for that is look at the YouTube video that we uploaded 2 weeks ago. Go.
Okay, yeah.
Next one, should you still try and get into university for medicine if you're unsure, or only if you're 100% sure that you want to do it?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You broke up, Mark. Will you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. Should you still try and get into university for medicine if you're unsure, or only apply if you're 100% sure?
If you're fairly confident, then yeah, if it's something that you're fairly confident on, then yeah. But medicine, you have to have your own personal statement, and it has to be kind of separate, and you're really only having a personal statement for medicine. So I think unless you're fairly sure, and because you can always do another degree and come back to medicine if you come back to it at a later date, which is fine, and always convert your degree in some degrees, so you can do that. So maybe fairly confident to confident.
Okay. A lot of places aren't accepting work experience due to Corona this year. How do we get around this?
Oh, right. Quick answer. We've got a whole hour webinar on it. But yeah, there's loads of ways to get around it. Insight is the key word here. So there's lots and lots of ways to get insight. So, virtual work experiences, webinars, podcasts, television programs. If you can't get in somewhere, you can get virtual stuff. If you can, there's volunteering, there's community work, there's befriending services. There's loads of different stuff that you can try, but everyone's in the same boat. So if you're struggling, everyone else is struggling. Remember that.
Okay. The next question is about whether the places will be different due to coronavirus this year. Some universities are deferring a lot of places because they've accepted too many people. Any advice on that? It's a difficult one.
That's a difficult one. My honest answer, I don't know whether universities know what they're doing, because who knows what they're doing right now, because this is so unknown. This is a pandemic expected. No one can plan for it. It's really hard. So I think if you can go with the flow a little bit, then great. If you do want to defer yourself, if you want to take a gap year, then fine. If you want to do another degree that's a bit more virtual, then fine. At the end of the day, medicine's always there if you're not 100% sure, want to try something else, because it's patient contact. So you have to be with patients and in university and things like that. So yeah, it's a bit difficult, but I think it's just keeping up to date with the universities and what they're saying, because I think everything is ultimately a bit up in the air, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think universities will probably release more statements after the initial UCAT results are out, which are out next week, a couple of weeks' time. So once the interim UCAT results out, I think the universities will start to put out more statements about how many places they're going to offer and how many places they're going to defer. But it's not going to increase the amount of competition, because you'll probably have the same amount of students applying for the same amount of spaces. It's just whether you get it this year or whether they try and defer you to next year.
Ultimately, still try and do everything that you need to do for an application process. Be as ready as you can. And if you're applying that year, then great, just go for it. At the end of the day, if things change, things change. But if you're ready and you're raring to go, then at least, if something happens and that something's deferred, then at least you can just strengthen your application process even further. And, you've got your place for the next year, or you need to reapply, then fine, just makes you in a better position.
Okay, last two questions, super quick.
Yeah.
What are the different teaching styles in medical schools?
Oh, okay. So problem-based learning, PBL, that's a big one. And that's going through like cases, and then some of your weeks in university is kind of like tailored to that. So it's more discussion and group work and things like that. You may have lectures as well. The other big one is kind of traditional learning methods, which is kind of more lecture-based, which is kind of sitting in a lecture theatre, and you might still have some group work, you might still have some lab work and things like that, and patient contact. And then you've got the integrated method, which kind of uses a bit of both.
Okay, last question. When should I start writing my personal statement?
Ooh, latest is like now. If you're in October 2020, get writing. And for those ones that are applying for October 2021, I'd suggest even start drafting your first draft by the end of August to the start of September before you go back to school. So then at least you've got a little bit of a draft and you can get cracking. Because once you start back at school and start back at college, you're going to be thrown so many more things by your teachers, and for your next study year, you're going to get a little bit sidetracked. So if you start and then get drafting, get bullet pointing, get, drafting again, and then it's out of the way.
Yep, and if you want to know more about the personal statements, watch our webinar, which is in 2 weeks' time. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put a link in the chat directly to the actual webinars page so everybody knows where it is. And then you've got that link, save it, so then it's there for you, and you can watch all our webinars next week as well. 1 second, let me paste it in. Cool, that's the link to the webinars. I've also put the link to the YouTube channel because we've mentioned a few videos that you might want to go and watch as well. That's in the chat, and I'll put it in the email maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, when I'll send the email out with the slides and the videos and things on as well. Cool, right, I think that's it.
We covered so much.
yeah, definitely. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to all the students that tuned in as well.
Yeah.
If you didn't get your questions answered, feel free to send us a message on some kind of social media, and we'll try and get back to you there as well. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll hope to see you in a couple of weeks' time.